looking how this works for each team for the Boston Celtics, obviously that guard rotation in the backcourt was an issue at some point during the season where it's like, okay, we got Derek White who's playing pretty well, who can step up in those moments as we saw. Malcolm Brogdon was solid as a six man. Um, Now he's going to still be with the team, even though he was about to be traded, and seeing how that works as part of the business. He's been traded before. But I think that at least answers that in the backcourt. So I guess Marcus Smart was the odd man out. And especially defensively, looking at how he was last season, a little bit step back, a couple injuries there from the Defensive Player of the Award that he won 2 years ago. The Celtics obviously like, okay, we can step up our defense, but we need our front court to be better, especially with Al Horford aging, Robert Williams not being as reliable health-wise as we've seen. But when he's healthy, he can play. Adding Kristaps Porzingis to this front court, it at least gives us a knockdown shooter. He shot, I believe, 38% last year's season, scores 20 points per game, around 8 rebounds, and around 2 blocks. So you're getting that on your team from the front court standpoint that you didn't have, from a Grant Williams perspective, from a Mike Muscala perspective, from a shooting perspective that we were looking when we traded for Mike Muscala or any other of these guys. You're at least getting that from that perspective. You're getting a shot blocker, actual 7-footer that can play with size. He's not a bad defender in pick and roll situations and stuff like that. The cons of that is the injury history that potentially lingers there, the potential extension that can be there for Kristaps Porzingis. But the upside from it is that you're spacing the floor tremendously now, and you get a little bit more flexibility there in your front court. If Al Horford can't go, you can still play Kristaps and Robert Williams together and still have a good defense and still have guys that can actually shot block and defend the rim. I think the con there is you lose a little bit of the switchability that the Celtics leaned on a lot over the past couple of seasons, where they're able to switch guys. Those days are gone, especially if Al Horford is going to be in limited capacity and getting older and stuff like that. Kristaps can hang out there a little bit, but it's going to be tough for him to be out there guarding guards out there. But at least if you have a little roamer, you're able to maybe even slide Jason Tatum and slide Brown into those forward spots, put Porzingis there. You at least have a more pick and roll situation there. Porzingis is a better finisher at the basket than Al Horford. So from that standpoint, I'm like, okay, I get it from the Celtics of that dynamic is that you at least spread the floor a little bit more. You at least have a little bit more depending shooting perimeter wise. You can get a guy that can finish at the basket and can get his own shot. And take a little bit of the pressure off of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. You at least have that type of score on your team at least consistently when healthy. He can do that for you. He can spread the floor. He can finish at the rim. I understand it from that standpoint. From the Memphis Grizzlies standpoint of getting Marcus Smart, I think that was in reaction to, of course, the John Morant suspension. Getting a guy like Marcus Smart, who has been a starter, who has been a combo guard, who can play off ball, who can be that defender that can get back into the grit and grind, Grizzlies grit and grind culture that they have. They're just gumming up the works. He basically replaces Dillon Brooks, a little bit more reliable than Dillon Brooks, in my opinion. I think Dillon Brooks is just too volatile. Doesn't really shoot well, even though Smart is not the best shooter. You at least get a little bit more consistency there in the offensive play from a playmaking standpoint, from a secondary ball handler standpoint when John Morant comes back. Also, just the defensive side of the ball. They do have 2 defensive player of the years on their team, and Marcus Smart and Jaren Jackson Jr. now. So you're getting that at least. You're returning Steven Adams. You're getting that toughness back from the Memphis Grizzlies side. And we'll see what other moves they are able to make. But I think that's a really good fit for Marcus Smart to go there. Really fit in with Jaren Jackson Jr. And Marcus Smart is not going to be a guy that's going to take over and try to score a lot in those situations, despite what everybody wants to think of him as a Celtic. As a Memphis Grizzlies perspective, I think he's going to be able to help a lot of the areas that they needed, especially with perimeter defense, and get back to being Marcus Smart, hopefully back down there in Memphis. From the Wizards standpoint, Tyus Jones is a nice little guard for them. They can potentially trade him, flip him, whatever the case may be, for a draft pick. Potential players, whatever the case may be. But if they decide to keep him, he's a nice young player. He's one of the best backup point guards in the league. So to have that in your cabinet as a Washington Wizards franchise going forward, you at least know you have a guy that you can at least rely on from a point guard standpoint if needed, depending on what you want to do. Yeah, but I'm flabbergasted here. Just from the standpoint of yes, Marcus Smart was traded. That was the first thing there that really shocked me.